I want you to just picture this for a second. You have gone completely off the grid. You're deep, deep in the woods.
Like miles from the nearest paved road.
Exactly. Miles away. You've left the noise of the city behind. You've left, the endless demands of your daily life, your inbox, your responsibilities. And you are actively seeking nothing but pure peace and quiet.
Just absolute silence.
Right. You're surrounded by these massive ancient trees. The air is completely still, but then out of nowhere, a messenger comes just crashing through the brush. Snapping branches, totally shattering that perfect silence. And, this messenger isn't just bringing you a letter from home or like a work emergency.
Right.
They are bringing you news that as of this exact second, you are about to become the leader of the free world.
It is an incredibly jarring image, isn't it? Going from absolute physical isolation to the literal center of global power. In the span of a single heartbeat.
Yeah, the contrast is wild.
And what makes it so compelling is the complete lack of transition. There's no buildup.
It really is. And while it's not fiction, this is exactly what we are unpacking today. The mission for our deep dive is to go through this really fascinating stack of historical accounts regarding Theodore Roosevelt.
A really incredible set of sources today.
Yeah, definitely. Specifically, we're looking at his profound, completely life-altering connection to the Adirondack Mountains in New York, where we're getting into human fragility, the mechanics of how wilderness heals, and a dramatic race against time in September of 1901.
Which is such a pivotal month.
So pivotal. But to really grasp the gravity of that moment when the messenger arrived, we have to kind of rewind, right? We have to figure out the underlying reason Roosevelt was even in those mountains in the first place.
We do, because the public perception of Theodore Roosevelt is almost entirely a caricature at this point. When we hear that name, we immediately picture this boundless, rugged, unstoppable force of nature.
Right, the Rough Rider. The guy up on Mount Rushmore.
Exactly. We think of absolute physical dominance. But if you look at the source material, the historical reality paints a completely inverse starting point. Long before he was president, he first came to the Adirondacks as a teenager whose health was terrifyingly fragile.
He had severe asthma, right?
Yeah, severe, debilitating asthma.
And we have to remember what asthma really meant in the 19th century. Today, you carry an inhaler in your pocket, and it's mostly manageable.
Right, it's an inconvenience for most.
But back then, it was essentially a death sentence hanging over your head. You were just waiting to suffocate. It's terrifying to even think about.
It really is.
So he wasn't arriving in the wilderness as some, conqueror of the landscape. He was vulnerable. He was arriving as a kid, desperately seeking the ability to simply breathe.
And the mechanism of his recovery is what is so fascinating here. Because, the medical advice of the era for a sickly child was often just confinement.
Stay in bed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Stay indoors. Rest, avoid exertion, keep the windows closed to keep the quote-unquote bad air out. But Roosevelt's father basically told him the exact opposite. He said, you have the mind, but you must build the body.
Wow.
So instead of resting, this fragile teenager just threw himself into the absolute friction of the wilderness.
Which, it feels a lot like the 19th century version of what people try to do today with, like, wellness retreats or biohacking. Right? Everyone is obsessed with optimization.
I see where you're going with that, yeah. But let's push a bit further on that comparison. Because modern biohacking is, it's entirely about control.
What do you mean by that?
It's about manipulating your environment to the millimeter. You want the plunge pool at exactly 48 degrees. You want the sauna at exactly 180 degrees. You have your macronutrients weighed out on a little digital scale.
Right. Tracking everything on your smartwatch.
Exactly. The goal is mastering the variables. But Roosevelt's method was the complete surrender of control.
Oh, that is a stark difference. So he was actively seeking out an environment he couldn't manipulate at all.
Right. He was submitting to the untamed elements. He was climbing freezing mountains, sneaking on hard ground, literally forcing his defective lungs to process thin, freezing mountain air through sheer, exhausting repetition.
Just brutal.
It was. He wasn't optimizing. He was adapting through brute force exposure to a landscape that honestly did not care if he lived or died.
And the incredible thing is, it worked. The physical act of moving through that rugged, unforgiving terrain literally rebuilt his pulmonary capacity.
It's amazing.
He built muscle, he expanded his lungs, and this wasn't just some temporary health kick. This experience embedded a core foundational philosophy in him. He learned firsthand that wilderness is It's like an active mechanical force. It physically reconstructs people.
Which fundamentally alters a person's relationship with the environment. I mean, if you grow up in the city, nature is just scenery, right? It's a painting on the wall.
Yeah, it's a park you walk through.
Exactly. But when your own body is failing and the brutal reality of the wilderness is the only thing that repairs you, your relationship shifts. It goes from passive appreciation to this deep, almost spiritual debt.
A debt that brings us right into the next major phase of his life in these sources. Because the mountains gave him his vitality, he felt this intense, undeniable duty to protect them.
He really did.
So, let's fast forward a bit. His physical transformation propels him into public life. He becomes the governor of New York, and he uses that immense political power to become just a ferocious champion for protecting the forests and the waters of the Adirondacks.
Right. He becomes instrumental in defending what is known as the Forever Wild Clause.
Right, which is a constitutional protection that is incredibly unique, even by today's standards. But I want to challenge his motives here for a second, though.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because think about human nature, right? You have a guy born into immense wealth who finds a place he absolutely loves to hunt and hike. Then he gets political power. Isn't it highly likely he was just, using his massive political weight to make sure his preferred elite hunting grounds weren't disturbed by anyone else?
That's a fair point.
I mean, was this really a noble crusade, or was it just a billionaire putting a velvet rope around his personal playground?
It is so easy to look at it through that cynical lens, especially given his family's wealth. But if we actually dig into the legislative battles of the time, the reality is much more complex.
Okay, how so?
We have to look at the economic engine of the era. This is the peak of the Gilded Age, right? Explosive, unbridled industrialization. The prevailing mindset of the entire country was strict utilitarianism.
Right. The era of smokestacks, steel mills, and robber barons.
Exactly. A tree only had value if it was cut down and turned into lumber.
Yeah.
A mountain only had value if you blasted it open to extract iron ore. Progress was defined entirely by extraction. If a piece of land wasn't making you money, it was useless.
Which was terrible for the environment.
It was devastating. The Adirondacks were being absolutely decimated by commercial logging. Entire mountainsides were being clear-cut, which was destroying the watershed that supplied the rest of the state.
Oh, wow. So it was an ecological crisis.
Yes. So when Roosevelt steps in to defend the Forever Wild Clause, he isn't just saying like, hey, leave my hunting cabin alone. He is advocating for a radical, almost heretical philosophy for the 1890s.
The idea of intrinsic value, right?
Precisely. He is arguing that a forest has massive value simply by existing as a forest.
And the mechanism they used to protect it is fascinating. They didn't just pass like a standard law that the next governor could easily repeal.
No, they didn't.
They embedded the Forever Wild Clause into the actual New York State Constitution.
Right.
They made it intentionally rigid, mandating that the state lands in the Adirondacks shall be kept forever as wild forest lands.
Forever.
Yeah, forever. They could not be leased, sold, or destroyed.
It was an act of profound foresight. He understood that the human spirit requires a sanctuary that operates totally outside the rules of commerce. He recognized that as society becomes more mechanized, and more artificial, the need for raw, untouched wilderness doesn't decrease.
It actually increases.
Exactly. It becomes more vital for our collective sanity.
Which sets up one of the most incredible historical juxtapositions I have, ever come across in a deep dive.
Oh, this is the best part.
We have Roosevelt, the champion of the intrinsic wilderness, the man who legally locked away millions of acres from modern development. And that very primitive landscape is about to become the backdrop for the ultimate turning point in American history.
The stage is set perfectly.
So let's move the timeline to September 1901. Roosevelt is now the Vice President of the United States. He's taking a trip up to the high peaks of the Adirondacks, and he is staying near what are known as the Great Camps.
Right, the Great Camps.
Now, we need to paint a picture of these camps for you because it really highlights the cultural tension of the era. Wealthy industrialists were buying up private tracts of land in the Adirondacks and building these massive, luxurious architectural estates directly in the middle of nowhere.
It was essentially an exercise in hubris.
Yeah.
I mean, it was the titans of industry trying to prove that their wealth could tame the wild.
It's like Gilded Age glamping.
That is exactly what it was. They would have enormous stone fireplaces, imported rugs, full staffs of servants, all hundreds of miles from civilization.
Just think about that. You are sitting on a velvet couch in a tuxedo, eating a multi-course French meal while, a bear walks past the window.
So absurd.
It is wealth-commanding nature to submit. But Roosevelt, true to his philosophy, isn't just lounging at the camp. He wants the friction.
He always wants the friction.
Always. So he leaves the luxury behind and heads out to climb Mount Marcy, which is the highest peak in New York. He is fully immersing himself in the absolute isolating silence of the mountains.
And this is where the timeline splits. Because while Roosevelt is standing on a silent, windswept summit, surrounded by just miles and miles of unbroken pine trees, a violent, history-altering event is unfolding hundreds of miles away in the industrial heart of Buffalo, New York.
Right. President William McKinley is attending the Pan American Exposition. He is surrounded by tens of thousands of people. He's surrounded by the newest electrical inventions of the modern age.
The absolute peak of modernity.
Yeah, and in that crowded space, an assassin walks up and shoots the president twice in the abdomen.
The contrast is staggering. Buffalo is just a scene of absolute chaos. Telegraph wires are buzzing, Secret Service agents are scrambling everywhere, doctors are rushing to operate. The entire machinery of the United States government goes into a full, widespread panic.
And the nation needs its vice president immediately.
But the vice president is totally unreachable.
Which is wild to think about. Think about what it means to be unreachable today. I mean, even if you lose cell service on a hike, there's usually a satellite phone or a GPS tracker or, like, a helicopter that can find you in an hour.
Right, you're never truly lost.
But in 1901, being in the Adirondack wilderness meant you were basically swallowed whole by the earth.
The very isolation that he cherished, the disconnection from the mechanized world that he believed was so essential for the human soul, had suddenly created a massive constitutional crisis.
Yeah.
The nation is essentially decapitated, and the next in line is wandering through a forest, admiring the birds.
It's a chilling thought. The world is tilting on its axis, telegraphs are flying across oceans, and he is just breathing in the cold mountain air, completely oblivious.
Completely.
Which leads us to the climax of this entire narrative from the sources. The mechanism of communication finally catches up to him.
Right. A guide is dispatched from the nearest telegraph station. He has to hike miles up into the high peaks just to locate Roosevelt's climbing party.
And that quiet, restorative hike is violently shattered. The messenger delivers the news that the president is gravely wounded. And instantly, the psychological and physical reality of the wilderness flips upside down.
It really does. It is no longer a sanctuary. It is a prison.
The landscape transforms into a hostile obstacle course. He has to get back to civilization, back to a telegraph wire, back to a train station. But remember the legislation we just discussed. The forever wild clause.
Oh, this is the ultimate irony.
It really is.
He has spent his political career ensuring that this landscape remained entirely primitive. He fought to keep developers out to prevent modern infrastructure from, paving over the woods. And now the very wildness he legislated into existence is actively standing between him and the presidency.
He practically engineered his own hurdle. It's almost poetic.
It is.
Let's walk through the physical reality of this journey out of the woods, because it was harrowing. It wasn't like a scenic drive. He hikes down the mountain to a lower camp, and from there, he has to take a horse-drawn carriage to the nearest train station.
Which is in a town called North Creek, roughly 35 miles away.
And 35 miles on modern paved roads is, a minor commute? But 35 miles on preserved 19th century wilderness trails, in the pitch black of night, in a rickety wagon, is a nightmare.
An absolute nightmare.
The route he took plunged right through the heart of the region. He's passing along the edge of these dark lakes, through thick, unlogged forests, right past what is now the area of the Alpine Homestead. Local, rugged roads that are honestly still challenging today.
Even with four-wheel drive.
Right. And we have to imagine the sheer physical violence of that carriage ride. It is the middle of the night, it is pouring rain, the roads are nothing but mud and exposed bedrock.
And the driver can barely even see the horses in front of him.
Wow.
The carriage is bouncing violently over boulders, threatening to snap an axle or throw them into a ravine at any second.
And inside that wagon, Roosevelt is just being thrown around, absorbing all of that physical punishment.
And add the psychological weight to that physical toll. He is sitting in the dark, bouncing over these rocks, not knowing if the president is dead or alive.
Yeah, the uncertainty.
Right. Not knowing if he is currently just a worried politician or the actual commander-in-chief of a grieving nation. The anxiety must have been absolutely suffocating.
It highlights a profound truth about the nature he fought to protect. True wilderness is utterly indifferent to human urgency.
Utterly indifferent.
It doesn't yield to a presidential crisis. It demands submission. No amount of political power could make those horses run faster over those rocks. He had surrendered his privilege to the landscape, and now he had to pay the toll.
They are rushing toward North Creek because there's a special train waiting there, engine hot, ready to rocket him across the state to Buffalo. They're changing horses at small outposts in the dead of night, pushing the animals and themselves to the absolute brink of exhaustion.
But the friction of the wilderness was simply too great. Despite navigating that rugged terrain as recklessly fast as humanly possible, the delay imposed by the mountains was decisive.
It was.
When he finally stumbles out of the carriage at the North Creek train station, battered, covered in mud, exhausted, he is handed a telegram. President McKinley has died of his wounds.
So the desperate race was over before it even really began.
Yeah. And shortly after, on September 14, 1901, Theodore Roosevelt is officially sworn in as the 26th President of the United States.
It remains one of the most dramatic, atmospheric ascensions to executive power in the history of the country. I mean, it's like something out of a movie.
So what does this all mean when we pull the lens back? We have traced a remarkable circular narrative here today. We started with a man who was physically broken, a teenager gasping for air, who came to these remote, unforgiving mountains because he desperately needed them to heal him.
Yes.
He found his literal strength, his ability to breathe in the dirt and the elevation of the Adirondacks.
And that healing instilled a belief system. It taught him the intrinsic value of untamed land.
Right. And then years later, standing on the summit of those exact same mountains he had fought to protect, he is suddenly thrust into the highest office in the land. The wilderness healed him, the wilderness delayed him, and ultimately the wilderness was the crucible where his presidency began.
And the legacy of that crucible is monumental. The Adirondacks didn't just give a fragile boy his muscles back. They forged the conservationist mindset that would alter the geography of the entire continent.
Because he takes it with him.
Exactly. Because once Roosevelt steps into the Oval Office, he doesn't leave that philosophy in New York. He takes the forever wild ethos national.
Right, the national park system.
He goes on to protect roughly 230 million acres of public land across the United States. National forests, bird reservations, national game preserves, and national parks.
That is a staggering amount of land.
It is. The massive sweeping landscapes we still enjoy today, the places millions of people visit to find their own peace and quiet, exist largely because a fragile kid learned the value of untamed land in the high peaks of New York.
It's incredible how a deeply personal, physical struggle in one specific location can echo out and physically shape the map of a nation for centuries.
It really is a powerful reminder of how our environments shape our character. And analyzing this entire arc from a fragile youth seeking air to a politician fighting industrialization to a grueling midnight ride in the dark, it leaves us with a very vital, modern reflection based on the sources.
Let's hear it. Think about your own life right now. We live in a world that is hyper-connected, relentlessly scheduled, and entirely digitized. We rarely experience true isolating silence unless, the power goes out.
Roosevelt had the Adirondacks. He had a vast, challenging landscape to restore his health when he was failing, to teach him about resilience, and to anchor his defining mission in life. So the question we have to ask ourselves in this modern era is, where's your forever wild space?
Exactly. That is the perfect question.
When the demands of the world are breaking you down, what is the physical place or even the mental practice that restores your vitality? Where do you go to find the friction that rebuilds you? And perhaps more importantly, if you are lucky enough to have found that sanctuary, what are you actively doing to protect it before the modern world paves it over?
That is the thought to sit with today, because we all need that unyielding sanctuary. We all need that place where we can retreat, disconnect, and rebuild our strength. Right up until the moment that proverbial messenger comes crashing through the brush, shattering the silence and calling us to step up and face the world.